So this report came from Shams, so we know it's real. The Knicks and Clippers are among interested teams in Derrick Rose. So the Pistons have been kind of weird this year because they're not good, but they're playing their veterans a whole lot of minutes. And it would not be surprising if they wanted to move off of that and just play the young guys, because you're going to lose anyway. You might as well be developing the young dudes a little bit. Should be said, Rose has been dealing with a knee thing that's left him out of a couple games in a row now. And, I mean, it makes sense as to why the Clippers would want Derrick Rose, because you could argue they still need some more ball handling and some more passing. You could also say that his lack of being a real shooter could hurt them. And even if they don't end up trading for Derrick Rose, I think it's the idea of, like, they're clearly looking for more playmaking. And as for the Knicks, I mean, Thibodeau likes Derrick Rose. He's already proven that he's willing to go get guys that played for his former teams. And the Knicks could still use some pop on offense, even if also D Rose, shooting-wise, kind of iffy. And the Knicks, for all the success they've had this season, you could argue that they still just need some shooting on that team. Although at the same time, between Quickly and Reggie Bullock, Austin Rivers, Kevin Knox has been better from three so far. Julius Randle's been all right. Maybe the spacing wouldn't be terrible with Derrick Rose out there. I think defensively, D Rose could at least keep up what the Knicks are doing. I don't think he would kill them on that stuff. And then on offense, you could say, well, his shooting wouldn't be exactly what they need, but I would also look at it as he's still more of a threat than Elfrid Payton, and Payton's been playing a lot for them. I guess the follow-up question to that would be, do the Knicks picture a world in which Payton and Rose are playing together? But I think there's potential there. Anyway, if we think about this move for the Clippers, what would it look like? I think it's very easy to just say, well, Lou Williams plus one or two of the Clippers' future seconds from the Pistons, going back to Detroit for Derrick Rose. You could say that we are deep enough into the season now to where it's safe to say Lou Will is just really not part of this Clippers team anymore. I mean, his shots are way down, his minutes are down. Maybe they think they can still get something out of him, but I feel like the writing is kind of on the wall. I think there's also a chance it could be Patrick Patterson and Reggie Jackson, those two combined to over $6 million, and that gets you close enough to Derrick Rose's salary, plus those second rounders again. If I'm thinking about this from the perspective of the Pistons, I don't really know who else on the Clippers they'd really want. I mean, there's Terrence Mann, there's Kabengele. Maybe the Pistons would demand some sort of a young player in a return for Derrick Rose. The Pistons GM, who had a whole thing about how he loves centers, maybe he would just really want Zubats. I don't think you're going to get him. But for the meme, perhaps. I don't think the Pistons should be set on, we have to get a first-round pick for Derrick Rose or whatever. I think any sort of an asset for a guy who is not going to be on this team past this season would be good. At least I assume they wouldn't want to hold on to D Rose. Killian Hayes has not been that good, which isn't surprising. Everybody said he was going to be a project. So maybe you'd want to hold on to Derrick Rose on a team-friendly contract just so you have some sort of competent point guard play for the next couple years. But there's also reason to just want to get an asset and just go from there, I guess. If we think about it for the Knicks' sake, I mean, Derrick Rose would be a real source of offense for him still. I mean, you think about the way they've been using Julius Randle. Could they have D Rose cutting off of that sort of action? Yeah, perhaps. You could also have some D Rose Randle pick and roll, some D Rose Mitchell Robinson two-man game. And as far as how it would happen, I mean, there's no way the Knicks are going to give you a first-round pick for Derrick Rose, but they, like the Clippers, have a Pistons second-rounder in the future. Maybe the Pistons would just want that back. They do have an influx of second-rounders over the next few years, so perhaps that would be enough for the Pistons to take that on. As far as the salary filler, it gets a little tough because Reggie Bullock has been an actual player for the Knicks so far. Taj Gibson can't get traded until April. And then it becomes kind of like, well, is it Ntilikina, Alec Burks, Elfrid Payton, Dennis Smith? Maybe one of those guys would be going to the Pistons with a second-round pick. To think about the Knicks and just trade stuff for them a little bit more, it will be interesting to see when they choose to cash in on some of these picks, if they do at all. I mean, there's a good reason for them to just use these picks, I mean, they're going to have this year's pick. They have Dallas's pick this year. And I just don't think they are going to think about moving those picks. Definitely not for Derrick Rose. Unless it's for Bradley Beal, probably. I mean, maybe Zach LaVine, but I just don't think the Zach LaVine thing is real. I mean, the Bulls would have to be really terrified of giving him any sort of a pay raise to move him right now. And I just don't think they should do that. Unless they were using him as ammo to trade for a better player. So we'll see. I think if the Clippers are dead set on getting Derrick Rose, I think they've got the best offer. Because again, they just have these 3 Pistons second rounders between 2024 and 26. And I just think that's going to be more valuable than any small contract or whatever somebody else could give the Pistons for D Rose. I guess another thing to think about with this, with the Knicks or Clippers wanting Derrick Rose is, does that mean that they envision re-signing him after this season? I mean, if they're going to move some stuff for him. For the Clippers, you could look at it as they're just all in on winning this year. There you go. But for the Knicks especially, it's like, well, they would have to view Derrick Rose as somewhat of a future option for them. And then it's like, well, how much are you really willing to give him? Maybe it's only $10 million a year or whatever. That would put them at about $64 million next season. And nobody who's off the books is really like a must re-sign guy right now. So perhaps there wouldn't be too much difficulty in holding on to him. But to get back to it for the Clippers, I mean, they're at $141 million next season, which is over the luxury tax. So unless they were also wanting to move off of some long-term money, I think a Derrick Rose trade for them would just be a one-season thing. Or Rose's next contract is just not going to be worth that much money. And before I get out of here, I do want to talk about the Clippers again, just this pursuit of more passing, because I do think they're showing their cards a bit by being in this rumor. They clearly want another ball handler and someone who can contribute to the we pass the ball more thing, which they do. I mean, PG and Kawhi are both up to like 6 assists a game this season. They're making the extra pass and swing offense and that sort of thing. I mean, Rubio makes a little too much money. I don't think they can get him. There's TJ McConnell. He's still been getting minutes for the Pacers, but maybe if you were determined enough for that sort of a guy, you could get him from Indiana. There's Lonzo, of course. That's been talked about enough. Since we're already talking about the Pistons, we could mention DeLon Wright. I don't know if the Pistons would want to give him up since he's a little younger than Derrick Rose, but that's something the Clippers might be able to look into. We're talking about the Knicks so much and how they want to improve at point guard. I mean, Elfrid Payton could be the type of guy that the Clippers could use. Is it crazy to suggest that the Suns would look to sell high on Cam Payne because he's having maybe the best season of his career through 17 games? I don't know, but I think those are some of the names to think about if we're seeing the Clippers clearly wanting another ball handler and stuff.